Hi everybody, TJ Mac Vintage Cards, and in today's video I'm going to have some fun with my collection. But first I wanted to show off one of the cases that I keep all my extra cards in that are not on display in my card room. And I have several graded cards in my collection, and I have a room where I store them all in, again, when they're not on display, and they stay in these Rubbermaid tubs. And then as I need them, I have them organized in such a way that I can put my themes together and then get the cards out on display, those that I choose to show. And I did show my card room a few videos back about the different displays that I have in my walls. And it's these cards in these bins that are my inspiration as I build the displays. And just as, I guess, a painter would work with paints, I work with these graded cards to come up with different creations to show off my passion for the hobby. So I thought you might like to see that. And this one's a 50s case. I just have different cards from the 50s and 60s that I like to display in the card room. I call this grouping here the Intimidators. This is a 61 Topps Early Win, 68 Topps Don Drysdale, and 74 Topps Nolan Ryan. First, we're going to take a look at the Early Win. I'll look at the expression on Early Win's face on this card. I didn't know much about his career other than he won exactly 300 games, and he was the 1959 Cy Young winner when he was on the Chicago White Sox team that went to the World Series that year and lost to the Dodgers. Now, he was also part of an early 1950s rotation that the Cleveland Indians had that had Bob Feller, Bob Lemon, and Mike Garcia. Now, I listened to a lot of interviews when I exercise, and I heard Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, and Duke Snider interviewed, and Mantle talked about how Wynn hated when a hitter would get a hit up the middle. Well, one day Mantle drilled a liner through the box for a single. When he got to first base, Wynn would act like he was going to pick Mantle off and then proceed to deliberately fire several balls at his legs. When Al Rosen would fill in at first base, he would tell the players that he liked to look out for Wynn throwing at them. Wynn told pitcher Gary Bell, "You'll never be a big winner until you start hating the hitter. That guy with the bat is trying to take away your bread and butter. You've got to fight for every second." With his large frame, his grizzled appearance, and his willingness to knock down opposing hitters, Wynn stood out as one of the most intimidating pitchers in the game. Roger Kahn, in his book A Season in the Sun, described how the pitcher once brushed back his own teenage son during a batting practice session at Yankee Stadium. "You shouldn't crowd me," snarled the elder Wynn. As he explained to Kahn, "I've got a right to knock down anybody holding a bat." This guy was an intimidator. Here we have the 1968 Topps Don Drysdale. Now, he was standing at 6 feet 6 inches tall, and he was a hard-throwing right-hander, and he had a sidearm delivery, and he feasted on brushbacking or hitting batters to control the plate. Now, Dodgers catcher Jeff Torborg said hitters would dig a hole and really get anchored with their back foot. Willie Mays dug in sometimes with both feet, and he looked up and realized it was Drysdale. I don't think he was even thinking of me at the time. He called timeout and filled up the hole as if to say, "I made a mistake. I didn't realize he was pitching." And then boom, down he went. Mickey Mantle said, "I know Don Drysdale's trying to hit me. He'll even come to the batting cage and say, 'Where do you want it today?'" I heard in an interview where Drysdale was told to intentionally walk Frank Robinson. So with the first pitch, he hit him. He was asked about it, and he said, "Why waste 3 additional pitches?" This guy was an intimidator. Just look at the face on this card. I just love this image of him, and that's why I picked this one out to showcase today. And then the last card is this 1974 Topps Nolan Ryan. And I love this card because it shows Ryan delivering a pitch, and it's giving you the batter's perspective. Now, I saw the internet advertisement for the documentary Facing Nolan, and it says this: 5,714 strikeouts, 108 mile-per-hour fastball, 7 no-hitters, one of a kind. Now, you know you're intimidating when they name your documentary Facing Nolan. When I was growing up, he was the premier power pitcher in baseball, and he was an intimidating force on the mound. He had no problem hitting you if you showed him up, and he would also brush you back if he felt you were crowding him in. And this card is just look at what it would feel like to be on the other end of a Nolan Ryan fastball. Such a wonderful image, and I just didn't realize until recently how much I enjoy this card because of that image and the perspective it gives you into facing Nolan Ryan. Here's one more shot of the three Intimidators together. Here we have three examples of what I enjoy about colors on cards. You have the 63 Topps Lou Brock, 63 Topps Football Roman Gabriel, and the 70 Topps Hockey Harry Howell. We'll first look at the Lou Brock. I'm a big fan of the 63 Topps set. I especially like them when the bottom here on the full bleed doesn't have a lot of chipping on it. And this example is a pretty good one, I think. And it's got the red background here. It goes nice with the C on his cap and also the striping on his collar there of his jersey. You have the blue on the bottom that goes with his cap, and then also the striping on the jersey as well. And then the white lettering, his name, matches the border nicely. This card has great eye appeal, draws you in, and just a very nice example of a 63 Topps card. This is a set that is a fun one to study and look at the different images and how the colors go together. But it's also just a nice of a set to flip through or just visually look at, just because it has that array of colors that are pleasing to the eye. This is a recent pickup. It's a Roman Gabriel 1963 Topps, a second-year card. Gabriel's a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback. He threw about 50 or so more touchdowns and interceptions, which for that era is spectacular. He has also put up a lot of yards every year throwing the ball in a time when passing was not preeminent in the game of football. It was more of a running game, and the defense is really honed in on receivers and would knock them going down the field. So to have a quarterback to put up those numbers that he did in that era is pretty impressive. He would be a player that would thrive in today's NFL like many of the great quarterbacks of that day. So I think he's a little bit forgotten. He never won a Super Bowl or an NFL championship, which I think hurts his Hall of Fame candidacy some, but he was one of the premier passers of his time. What I like about this card is the different shades of green are very nice, and then on the nameplate is what I'll call it here. It has the darker green with the yellow team name and position with the white of his name, which goes great with the jersey and the clouds in the background. And the green really encases the inside picture, and that blue jersey pops because of it, I think. And that sky in the back just captures you. And this card shows very nice for the grade. It does not have hardly any touches on the corner. Just a beautiful example, one that's visually appealing. Look forward to getting this into my card room. The third card here is this Harry Howell. Great use of yellows and greens on this card with the yellow background and the spotlights that were shown in the 1970 set to show the players off under the lights, so to speak. And then you have the Seals sweater, and the Seals were an expansion team from the late 60s when the NHL expanded from the original 6. And Harry Howell was the only Hall of Famer to ever play for the Seals. He was known for being a Hall of Famer really with the New York Rangers, but he did spend some time with the Seals and the Kings, and he may have played for another team towards the end of his career. But a wonderful example of this card in a grade 8. My son likes this because he has this giant smile on his face. He looks like a used car salesman, he says, or a businessman. Cool image of a great player from that time, and he was the last defenseman to win the Norris Trophy before Bobby Orr won it 8 straight times. So that's his claim to fame. And he predicted that it would be a while before another defenseman would win it once Bobby Orr hit the league. So he was right in his prediction. Just a beautiful card. Show these 3 colorful and beautiful cards together one more time. Last 3 cards I'm going to show today are the 1966 Topps Whitey Ford, 1950 Bowman Chuck Bednarik, and the 1955 Bowman Frank Gifford. These are 3 cards with personality that I think captures the players. When I look at my cards and just study them, I like to find ones that capture the essence of who I thought the player was as depicted in their card. So I'll talk about these 3. Look at that face on Whitey Ford there. That just captures the sly pitcher that he was, and he was the ringleader of those Yankees teams of the 1950s and early 60s that were hard partying with Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford and Billy Martin. And I just love this image because it does have that smirk on his face. He was kind of a smart aleck type guy, and I always enjoyed listening to him being interviewed. And behind him here you see the Yankee facade, and then there's also a player leaning there against, looks like a batting net. Just a nice image of mid-60s baseball, and I just like how it captures Ford's face here and really the essence of the person he was. I think cards can do that if you really study them and just try to pick up on the characteristics of them. And here we have Concrete Charlie Bednarik, or Chuck Bednarik. And this was one tough dude. He flew 30 bombing missions in World War II as a machine gunner on a B-24 Liberator. And he would talk about how he would be in the mess hall before the missions, and there would be certain people in there, and he would come back, and many of those young men were gone. They would obviously die on those missions and plane crashes. Very troubling time, certainly, to be growing up in and coming of age in. And a lot of these men would enter into football and would be very good players. They had great work ethics because of what they had to go through and endure during the war. And it's just a wonderful generation to learn about. And Bednarik is one of those guys that I think really signifies that generation. And behind him here you have a brick wall, and his nickname was Concrete Charlie, and you have another wall behind him, so I think that's a great depiction of his character, and you can just see the expression on his face. It really captures the essence of Chuck Bednarik. And then next to him you have this Frank Gifford. This is the 1955 Bowman Frank Gifford. And this captures 1950s America, in my opinion, with the crew cut on Gifford, the handsome face there with the big smile, and then you just have the green pastel color in the back with the angelic white around his head, the old school Giants logo, and then you got the nameplate with Frank Gifford in position on the bottom. Love this card, and Gifford was one of the faces of football in the 1950s. And this captures the essence of who Frank Gifford was and how he was thought of by a lot of the players in the league. He was viewed by some as a pretty boy, and guys like Chuck Bednarik didn't mind taking a hit on him when they could. And it was actually Bednarik that knocked Frank Gifford out of a game and knocked him out for a whole season on November 20th, 1960. Put a pretty hard hit on him. It was such a hard hit that Gifford got taken off the field in a stretcher, and his wife was standing outside the Giants' dressing room when the team physician stuck his head out the door and said, "I'm afraid he's dead." Only after she started sobbing did Mrs. Gifford learn that the doctor was talking about a security guard who had suffered a heart attack during the game and not her husband, Frank Gifford. Even so, Gifford didn't get off lightly. That concussion, like I said, knocked him out the entire 1961 season, but he returned in 62 to have a few more great years before retiring. And he never held a grudge against Bednarik for that hit. He said if he had a chance, he would have done the same thing. It was not a dirty hit. So I thought that was classy of Frank Gifford. One last look at these three cards with personality. And I just want to thank everybody for their time today and have a great weekend.